A man collapsed in her diner, gasping, pale, dying. She saved him without knowing the truth. Then, he whispered something that shattered everything. "I'm your father." But he wasn't just any man. He vanished with a billionaire's secret, and someone wants him dead. What he hid could destroy her. The morning rush at Rosie's diner was nothing special, until it was. Cassie Turner stood behind the counter, pouring coffee into a chipped white mug for an old regular named June, who was already halfway through her crossword. The sizzle of bacon echoed from the kitchen. The air smelled of burnt toast and cheap cologne. It was loud, messy, routine, just how Cassie liked it. She leaned down to clear a plate from table, for when she noticed the man sitting there had gone still. Too still. His fork hovered above his half-eaten eggs, hand shaking slightly. "Sir," she asked gently, a flicker of concern in her voice. No response. His eyes stared blankly ahead, and then suddenly he slumped forward. The plate clattered to the floor. Silverware bounced across the linoleum. "Hey, sir!" Cassie's voice rose, panic threading through her tone. The diner fell silent. June stood up. Someone gasped. Cassie dropped to her knees beside the man, her fingers fumbling to check his pulse. Her breath hitched. He was fading fast. She looked around, desperate. "Call 911, she shouted. Now. A younger man at the counter pulled out his phone, hands shaking. Cassie pressed her palms to the man's chest and started CPR. 30 compressions. 2 breaths. Again. Her arms trembled. Sweat gathered at her temple. Come on, come on. Stay with me, she whispered under her breath. She wasn't even sure he could hear her, but it didn't matter. She had to keep going. Behind her, the crowd hovered like ghosts, silent, helpless. Then, finally, a shallow gasp. He blinked, just once, like waking from a nightmare. Cassie froze, staring down at him, unsure if she should cry or scream. Sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder. The man's eyes met hers. They were glassy, dazed, but filled with something strange, something familiar. "You're okay," she said softly, more to convince herself than him. "You're okay. You're gonna be okay." His lips moved, barely. She leaned closer. He whispered, "Thank you." Cassie. Her heart stopped. He shouldn't know her name. She hadn't told him. 3 hours earlier, the world hadn't changed yet. The sun hadn't even cleared the hills when Cassie Turner pushed open the back door of Rosie's diner. Her breath puffed in the cold morning air as she tightened the knot on her apron. The fluorescent kitchen light buzzed above her, flickering like it always did. "Morning, Cass," called Tommy from the grill, flipping pancakes one-handed while unwrapping a fresh pack of bacon. His hair was still wet from a rushed shower, and he wore the same cracked smile he always did at the start of a long shift. "Morning," Cassie replied, forcing her voice into something upbeat. It was easier that way. The front of the diner was still half dark. She clicked on the neon open sign, its light humming to life, bathing the window in electric pink. She glanced at the tip jar, still nearly empty from yesterday. She didn't let herself think too long about it. Rent was due, and the gas bill was already pink slipped on the counter back home. By 7 a.m., the regulars had started to trickle in. June, with her crossword puzzles and peppermint breath. Mr. Callahan, who only ever ordered rye toast and liked to talk politics no one asked about. Even Eddie, the guy who brought his laptop and sat for hours on 1 cup of coffee. Cassie greeted each one with the same easy warmth, though behind her smile was exhaustion. The kind of tired that didn't go away with sleep. When her manager, Laura, pulled her aside near the pastry case, Cassie knew what was coming before she opened her mouth. "We're cutting Friday shifts." "I'm sorry, Cass. I tried to fight for you." Cassie nodded, chewing on the inside of her cheek. "It's okay. I get it. But it wasn't okay. That Friday shift meant groceries. Meant keeping the lights on." Back at table 2, June reached out and lightly tapped Cassie's arm. "You look tired, sweetheart," she said gently. "Everything all right?" Cassie smiled. "Just one of those mornings." June gave her a knowing look. "You're always taking care of everyone else. Don't forget to take care of yourself, too." Cassie chuckled softly, moving to pour her another coffee. "Working on it." She didn't say how alone she felt most days. or how she still sometimes dreamed about a man whose face she couldn't remember, just a deep voice calling her name. The same name the stranger would speak just hours later. The ambulance pulled away, its red lights fading into the distance. Cassie stood in the diner's entryway, her apron stained with sweat and the man's spilled coffee. The crowd inside had thinned out, some patrons left shaken, others awkwardly murmuring that they were proud of her. Tommy handed her a paper cup of water. "You okay?" She nodded slowly, though her hands wouldn't stop shaking. "Yeah, I think so." He glanced out the window. "You saved that guy's life, Cass. That's huge." She gave a half smile, something distant in her eyes. "It doesn't feel like enough." Tommy tilted his head. "Enough for what?" She didn't answer. Not because she didn't have one, just because she didn't know how to say it out loud. Later that afternoon, the normal rhythm crept back in. The booths filled again. Orders barked from the kitchen. Plates clattered, and the smell of grease floated in the air like nothing had ever happened. But Cassie was different now. Her body was here, but her mind kept replaying the morning. The way the man had gasped. The whisper. Her name. She hadn't told him. She was sure of that. Her thoughts were interrupted by a customer waving his receipt. "Excuse me?" "I asked for no onions," the man said, irritated, holding his sandwich like it had betrayed him. Cassie apologized, offered to fix it. He rolled his eyes and muttered, "Typical." Typical. She didn't snap back. She didn't even flinch. She just nodded, took the plate, and walked it back to the kitchen, her face blank. But inside, something burned. As the afternoon wore on, her manager pulled her aside again. "Cassie, you're distracted," Laura said, not unkindly. "I get it. What happened was traumatic. But we can't afford mistakes." Cassie blinked. "I didn't make a mistake." Laura sighed. "No, but you know how thin we're stretched. If things keep slowing down, we might have to cut even more hours." Cassie nodded, biting her tongue. She walked to the break room and sat down, alone, her hands in her lap. For a second, she let herself feel it. The fear. The anger, the loneliness. She had saved a man's life and still might not be able to pay rent next week. Hero or not, nothing had really changed. Not yet. The next morning felt like any other. Cassie was wiping down the counter, humming softly to distract herself from the mountain of bills waiting at home, when the doorbell above the entrance jingled. She looked up and froze. It was him, the man from table 4. The one whose heart had nearly stopped in her arms. He stood in the doorway like a ghost, paler than before but alive, somehow steadier. His clothes were pressed, but simple, like he was trying to blend in. His eyes scanned the diner slowly, then locked onto hers. Cassie's heart skipped. Her hands instinctively clutched the rag she was holding. He walked toward her, careful, quiet. "Hi," he said, voice gravelly, almost hoarse. "I hope this isn't too strange." She stared, unsure how to respond. The last time they'd spoken, he had barely been breathing. "You came back," she managed. "Are you okay?" He gave a faint nod. "Thanks to you. The doctor said you saved my life." Cassie's instinct was to downplay it, so she gave a small shrug. "I was just doing what anyone would have done." He looked at her with a kind of softness that made her uncomfortable, like he was seeing through her, not just at her. "No," he said firmly. "Not everyone would have done what you did." There was an awkward pause. He shifted his weight like he wanted to say more but wasn't sure how. "I wanted to thank you in person," he said. "I didn't get the chance before." Cassie gave a polite smile. "Well, I'm glad you're okay." "I'm John," he said, offering his hand. She hesitated, then shook it. His grip was gentle but sure. "Cassie." He held her gaze. "I know." Her stomach fluttered. Of course, she thought. The EMTs must have said her name. Or someone at the diner. But still, something about the way he said it made her feel watched. Not in a creepy way. In a familiar way. John glanced around the diner. "Would it be all right if I stayed for breakfast?" Cassie nodded slowly. Yeah, of course." He picked table 4 again. The same one, as if drawn back to it. She brought him a menu, trying to act normal. But her hands were cold, her mind racing. When she set down the coffee, she caught him staring at her wrist, at the small birthmark near the base of her thumb. He looked away quickly, but she saw it. He knew something. He knew her. Cassie didn't sleep that night. She lay on her couch, the hum of the refrigerator filling the silence, her phone face down beside her. Her apartment was small, one bedroom, barely enough space to breathe. But tonight, it felt cavernous, like something had cracked open and now all the shadows were pouring in. She kept thinking about his eyes, John's voice, the way he said her name like it wasn't just a word, but a memory. And that look when he saw the birthmark on her wrist. That wasn't casual recognition. That was connection. Finally, she got up, barefoot and quiet, moving through the dark to the coat closet. She reached up to the top shelf and pulled down a battered shoebox sealed with 2 rubber bands. She hadn't opened it in years. Inside were the only pieces of a life before the system. A worn-out photograph of a little girl holding a yellow balloon. A hospital bracelet with the name Cassie T. And a faded Polaroid of a man in a flannel shirt, smiling with tired eyes. In the photo, he's holding her, small, no older than 5, with a hand resting gently on her back. She turned the photo over. Written in shaky pen, John, 1999. Her heart stopped. John. She turned the photo back over. Looked closer. There, on his right hand, a thin, pale scar, just like the one she saw on the man at table 4. Cassie sat down hard on the floor. Her breath came shallow, like the air had changed somehow, heavier, harder to swallow. It was him. The man who had nearly died in her arms was the man who vanished from her life before she could even understand what a father was. She clutched the photo to her chest. Her eyes burned, but she didn't cry. Not yet. A storm had started inside her, and it was only just beginning. It was just after close when Cassie stepped out into the empty parking lot, her breath visible in the cool night air. The diner's lights were dimmed, the neon sign buzzing softly behind her like a heartbeat she couldn't shut off. She didn't expect him to be there, but John stood by the edge of the lot, near the old payphone that hadn't worked in years, hands in his coat pockets, shoulders slightly hunched, as if the truth he carried had weight. He turned as she approached, his expression unsure. I didn't want to leave town without talking to you again. Cassie stopped a few feet away. She didn't cross her arms, didn't run. She just stood there, tired, confused, and aching in places she didn't know could still ache. I found a picture, she said quietly, from when I was a kid. You were in it. John swallowed hard. His eyes, those same tired, gentle eyes, looked down. I was hoping you had something. Anything. So it is you, she said, her voice catching. You're my father. He nodded slowly. Yes, I am. A thick silence hung between them. Cassie's voice trembled. Where were you? All this time. His shoulders fell, like a man who'd rehearsed this moment too many times and still couldn't get it right. There was a car accident. Your mother died. They told me you didn't make it either. She blinked, stunned. What? I searched for years, Cassie. I did. But by the time I found out the truth, that you survived, that you were placed in the system, it was too late. Your records were sealed. No one would tell me anything. He stepped forward a little, slowly. And then I was scared. Scared I'd already missed too much. That you wouldn't want me. Cassie's voice cracked. I didn't want anything. I needed someone. John's face broke, years of regret crashing over him. I know. And I'm sorry. I can never undo that. She turned away for a moment, hands gripping her elbows. Tears welled in her eyes, hot and sharp. Do you know how many birthdays I spent wondering if you were out there? How many times I stared at that photo, trying to remember your face? I do now, he said quietly. She wiped her cheek, not ready to let him see everything. Why did you come to the diner in the first place? That can't be coincidence. He hesitated. I didn't know you worked there. I was just passing through. I didn't expect anything. But when I saw your name tag, your face, I couldn't breathe. She turned back toward him. Her walls were still up, but there was a crack in the door now. I don't know if I can forgive you, she whispered. John nodded. I'm not asking for that. I just want a chance to be part of your life, even if it's only a small part. Cassie stared at him. For the first time in years, she didn't feel angry. She just felt tired. And for once, not alone. I don't know what this is, she said softly, but maybe we don't have to figure it out all at once. John's eyes brightened just a little. That's enough for me. They stood there in the quiet for a long while. Two lives paused for far too long, beginning again under a flickering streetlight. The next evening, Rosie's diner served its final plate of pancakes. Cassie wiped down the counter slowly, like she didn't want to finish. The regulars had come in for one last goodbye. June left flowers. Eddie brought a handwritten note. Even Mr. Callahan tipped $20 and didn't complain once. But now the booths were empty. The lights dimmed, and Cassie stood alone in the quiet hum of the place that had, for better or worse, been the only real constant in her life. The bell over the front door jingled one last time. John stepped in, holding 2 cups of hot cocoa in a takeout tray. Didn't think you'd want more coffee, he said with a small smile. Cassie gave a tired laugh and gestured for him to sit. Good call. They sat in the same booth he'd collapsed in days ago. It felt different now. Less like an accident, more like fate. Cassie sipped the cocoa and stared out the window. I used to pretend my dad was a war hero, she said suddenly. Or a musician. Someone who had a reason for being gone. John looked down. I wanted to be. I just wasn't strong enough to look for you the right way. She nodded slowly. I'm not angry. I mean, I was for a long time. But mostly, I just didn't want to feel forgotten. He met her eyes. You were never forgotten. Silence, but a good kind this time. Cassie looked around the diner one last time. The cracked tiles, the faded jukebox, the memories she made while trying to forget everything else. It's weird, she said. This place is closing, but it feels like something's finally opening. John smiled. Maybe this isn't the end of anything. Maybe it's the start. Cassie glanced back at him, at the face in the photo that used to haunt her. Now sitting across from her, older, softer, flawed, but real. She reached into her apron and pulled out the photo, placed it on the table between them. I kept this, she said, all these years, even when I told myself I didn't care. John's fingers hovered over the image, trembling. Cassie didn't move away, didn't pull back. She just said, so what now? And for the first time in both their lives, they didn't have to pretend anymore. Whatever came next, they'd figure it out together.